you just stop it, bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump.
Okay, so here's a track I made in the same style as Sidney Charles, Josh Baker, blending tech house with garage, which is why I like Sidney Charles so much. So I'm just going to run through the elements of the drop and show you how and why I've done what I've done and how you can interpret this in your own way into your own projects. Before I dive into it, I want to let you know about a few things. I have been revamping the course I was originally selling. I took it down, I've added a lot more to it, changed it. The course is actually included in the mentorship program that I'm doing at the moment, but I'm also now selling it separately on the side. I'll put the link in the description. It goes through how to start a track, how to finish a track, bass patterns, chord progression, drums, mixing, mastering, structure and arrangement. Pretty much a full guide on how to make dance music that's current. And the other thing I'm offering for a select few, I'm actually really busy right now, is a mentorship where I do 12 hours of one-on-one split into 2-hour sessions, plus the course then gets included. If this is something that interests you, email me directly with a link to some of your tracks so I can see if you're the right fit. The drums. Let's go through each element. I'm combining drums and 909 drums. I've got this fat 909 kick mixed with this. Okay, it's just a ghost kick, and at the end we've reversed one. And that happens every 8 bars. Then we have a rim with another top rim. Then we have this clap that is being reverbed through a send. The send is a Valhalla room on the snare big room. Now, Josh Baker actually runs tutorials himself where he talks about having a reverb send that a lot of drum elements go to in order to create this idea of cohesiveness. A lot of it sounds like it's in a warehouse. It's all washed. It's all very swung. One of the ways to get it cohesive is sending parts of your drum elements through to a reverb, the same reverb. It creates this glue and it's current in its genre. The next things to talk about are these. Okay, so this is another big one. Originally, without the effects, here's what it sounds like. So what we're doing is turning it into this. And it sounds nothing like, it's just a break beat. Why does it sound like that? Well, there's numerous factors and reasons, and it's something that happens a lot in this style of house. And then Sidney Charles is kind of implement elements in more of that garage flow, but not something that I can typically hear in his tracks. I've added it here, it's a Josh Baker thing. Why does it sound like that? Well, firstly, EQ, and secondly, the biggest thing of all, is this filter freak. What it's doing is adding a resonance spike in the EQ, okay, and then it's modulating up and down the EQ. I've got it at 100% wet, so you can't hear any of the original sample. That resonance spike is what creates that sound, is creating that filter sound that's going up and down. There are other ways to do this in your EQ, and you can automate the resonance spike going up and down. The Filter Freak is a really good plugin to do that. There are other plugins that emulate this. It's massive in this genre. I'm then adding another EQ just because sometimes it can add lower frequencies that we don't want. Next, I have this. It's an enveloper. I use this on a lot of garage. You can see that in previous tutorials I really emphasize the use of short-tailed, clean samples where there isn't a lot of reverb, there isn't a lot of tail end of samples coming through. We're basically cutting off anything that doesn't play above a certain gain threshold to tighten up the sample. This is a massive tech house technique used by Chris Dussy, people within that lane, they'll shorten up the samples, and it's used in Garage all the time. I use it all the time. What you can do is grab an enveloper, put the gain down, and this is a really harsh cut, but you can do it in your own way, and you can use any plugin to emulate this. I have a sample delay which is adding stereo width as well. It's widening the sound coming out of my wider frequencies. Why do we do this? Well, we want to make space for everything that sits in the mono frequencies, anything that goes down the middle. So when we can add stereo width, we do it in the top loops. Perhaps some of the samples are panned out, elements in the synth are going through the wide elements, any ambiances or string elements, I want them wide, and the bass and kick is coming straight through the center, so that in club speakers, which are always in mono, we don't lose the main fundamental sounds. But then when you're listening in your headphones, it has this wide 3D almost sound, which is created through stereo width. Next, I'm using a kickstart just to sidechain it to the kick, and I do this with all my top loops. But this isn't just the only one we have going on. You can see we have 3 zap sounds. And they're all being reverbed to the same thing as well. But these zap sounds are again using the same filter freak technique, and they're being panned left and right as well. We're also adding a phaser, makes it sound even more like a zap. It's messing with the frequencies, creating that effect that you hear in a lot of house raves. Super important. Next, we have hats playing on every 16th note, which is very common within this genre that Josh Baker makes. He'll have it going every single one. In this, you can see that I've swung the elements. It's always behind the beat. Hats typically tend to be behind the beat, playing on every 16, but I wanted to create a more unique pattern, so I went through and see what fit the track that I'm making, because the 16th just cluttered up my mix. So I took out elements and made it sound more clean, bouncy and unique to its style. I'm partnering 2 here, and they're just closed hats. Next, just 2 open hats. Again, the open hats are being sent to the reverb. This is I would never do this in Garage, but we're doing it here. The next really important element are these snares. All of these drum elements are really carrying the song. We have offbeat rim shots happening, which is a typical Garage technique. They're happening in between hits, and at the end of every 4 bars, we have this pattern here, which is being played by this 808 snare, and then sent through my bus, and then sent to this reverb channel as well, which is carrying the rhythm and the flow. Super important at the end of every 4 to 8 bars. It's just typical of what they do, and it really suits this genre. Later on, I'm adding top loops, and it's just after 16 bars we want to make a change or layer some things so that we keep the listeners interested, we keep the track flowing, we keep the energy going, it doesn't become boring and too repetitive. One really good way to do that is layering different things. For instance, top loops, we can add in more layered snares, hats, anything, or we could take things away and chop up the rhythm. There are lots of different ways to do this. I've also added this vinyl crackle just to create these differences between sections. As for the drum bus, well, let's go through the effects I'm using. Okay, so the first thing I have is an EQ that's being automated throughout the track just to create these transitional effects, like for instance taking out the high end and low end in certain parts for transitional purposes. Here you can see that we take away the high end. Again, super common technique. Next we have this, which is a glue compressor with a slow attack and fast release. Don't really want it doing more than 4 dB of gain reduction, it's just gluing the track together. Next, some saturation at this amount, which adds harmonic distortion and warmth to the samples, to the group. Thickens everything up, makes it sound more rich. Super important. I am then adding to that with a sausage fattener, which is doing the same thing. Next we have this clipper. One thing I like to do is A/B my volume before and after effect. Before effects we're hitting -7.4, but after effects we're hitting around the same. It just sounds a lot louder, and that's to do with the clipping. We're adding what's called perceived loudness without actually affecting the headroom of the track. Next we have this send that's doing parallel drum compression. So we have one send for parallel drum compression, but what parallel drum compression does is you can send a signal there to be affected on that bus channel and then slam the compressor. It just brings out energy in the drums. It's an age-old technique used in every genre of music. Thickens up the waveform. Next we have this transient designer on the snare, and what it's doing is just adding transient to our overall drums, making them sound more punchy. Going to the bass. How to create the bass? Well, this is I actually referenced a Sidney Charles track, but I'm not sure which one it was. I took inspiration from it and changed the MIDI, and obviously the key is different. One thing I really suggest is grabbing a few reference tracks to take inspiration from. You can look at the bass line using stem splitters in your chosen DAW and then see the pattern of their MIDI. Then you can interpret it in your own way and make it in your own way. If you're going from scratch and just try and play something without reference or inspiration, it can sometimes confuse you. So one thing I like to do is reference tracks a lot. Main bass is doing this simple pattern here. But there's something to be said about it, which is the filter resonance is coming up in certain elements. So yeah, you can see how the resonance comes up in certain elements. This is to create movement in the bass. So it's not necessarily having an incredibly complex bass line in this genre of music. Quite often it's actually really repetitive. It's just what they're doing with the bass. Sometimes they're doing call and response, where they have two basses playing off of each other. Another thing they like to do is layer the basses with lead sounds, which is what I'm doing here. And to add movement, we can play with the cutoff in the actual patch itself and the resonance like I'm doing here, so that at the end of every 2 bars feels like there's a change happening, creating momentum, keeping the listener interested. So we're also partnering it with other lead sounds. For instance, let's have a look at each one. This one is just playing the root note of the bass that's being played in the MIDI. And you can see here it's doing a sustained note, has some reverb that I've actually automated, so at the end of the note it reverbs out and then cuts off when the snare hits. When you do this and you have reverb tail and then cut it where the snare hits, it creates this almost whip effect. It's really common. You're cleaning up your track. It's not necessarily about adding lots of things, it's about doing the right things and cleaning them up to sound really impactful. When new producers get in and they hear a Sidney Charles or Josh Baker style track, they often overcomplicate things, put too much in there. But what we actually want to do is do the simple things right and clean up our tracks so things sound more impactful. This is one of the techniques to do. We're automating a reverb decay time so that it lasts longer than the actual MIDI and cuts off when the snare hits, to partner our original bass. And there are some other elements being layered as well, for instance this one, which is a lead sound that is playing same pattern as the original bass. Whenever I'm adding layers, lead layers to partner the bass, I'm playing exactly the same pattern that's being played in the bass, because if I played a different rhythm here it might clash with the original rhythms, and we don't want too much happening. We want everything sounding cohesive, so it sounds like there's a lot going on, but there actually isn't. It's just being layered. Another layer is here, and you can grab these lead sounds anywhere. You can just go into Splice, type lead, filter it down to Tech House, and you'll come up with so many, and you can create your own stuff of that, your own ways of layering. And you don't want to overcomplicate it. You see, there are so many versions here where I've overcomplicated it and then I've just taken them out. Other elements I add is this Rhodes here, which is just playing on the offbeat. Something else I have is this wobbly electric piano. And a lot of these songs that are happening in the house scene at the moment, because the patterns are sound complex, but they're just happening right here. You see how I've played it just before the beat. It's the beat before the beat. that creates that offbeat swing that's happening a lot in this genre. Almost every track. Again, I have it here. And then I have another layered synth happening at the start of the drop, which is here. And then here. This is actually playing the same rhythm as the bass, it's just being delayed. And again, we're adding lead sounds to partner the bass so that everything sounds cohesive. The rhythms are staying the same, apart from here. Not that much is clashing, it's all staying nice and cohesive. One main bass line, and then things are partnering in and around it. Not all of the time, it's happening every 2 to 4 bars, so we keep the listener intrigued and we keep the bounce and the flow of the track happening. We could talk about mixing effects like reverb. Again, I've done some reverb automation here, but I've also done some resonance automation like I've done in the bass in this lead sound. I'm not having any of the low end come in, and everything is being sidechained to the kick as well. These subtle automation techniques that are happening to the lead sounds are super important, because if I have the reverb tail off and it never ends, when I'm creating clutter in the track, it's not as clean. And in minimal tech house or Sidney Charles, not so much Josh Baker, things are super clean. Let's look at the mix of the bass. Well, again, we're adding saturation for that harmonic distortion. We're adding a mid-side EQ and side only, taking away that sub-frequencies in the side elements so our bass can be focused in the mono. This is a subtle technique that you can do to tighten up that mono. A super effective technique. I have a max bass, which is boosting the frequencies here. It's a waves plugin, allows for a bit of distortion, allows your bass to really pump through, but you can use this in different types of plugins. You don't need to have this plugin. Again, I'm doing the clip where I'm A/Bing it before and after to make sure the levels aren't going higher than they were before. I'm just increasing that perceived loudness, and a kickstart so that everything sidechains to the kick.